In the second feature, we are going to focus and speak more about what do I, as a consumer, look for when I go shopping for a solar panel system.
Indeed. Today's suppliers and installers are in very strong competition, not only because the market is huge, but also because the demand is high. When you go to the shops and to the suppliers to ask for quotations, it's important, first of all, to compare like with like. The first thing you need to decide is the size of your system. The PV system, the solar panel, comes in specific sizes, usually between 300 and 400 watt peak. And how do you know that? You know it because there is a sticker at the back of that panel that tells you this information. What does it mean? It means that when this solar panel is in the sun and the sun is at its peak, usually at noontime on a summer day, then that panel is expected to produce 300, 350, 400, it depends what is written on the sticker at the back. And this means that that is the optimum that it can produce. Now, if you want a large system made up of a number of panels, then you need to decide how many kilowatt peaks you need. The maximum you can install in a dwelling in Malta for a single phase system is 3.6 kilowatt peak or 3,600 watts peak. What does it mean? If each panel is 360 watts, it means that the maximum you can install are 10 panels of that type. 360 times 10 is 3,600 watt peak. So when you go to look for a system, if you want to install the maximum, you need to always ask for that same peak power. Why? Because the peak power determines what type or what size of inverter you need. The inverter is that component that converts the DC voltage of the PV panel into AC voltage. So depending on the size of the panels, you buy the inverter. And in order to help you to compare between systems, always stick to the same kilowatt peak. The second thing you need to sense from the supplier is whether they are ready to come and see your rooftop or your facade or wherever you want to do those panels. Because PV systems are site specific. You need to look for what type of roof you have, if it is concrete or stone slabs, what we call in Maltese shorok, that are less capable of holding loads, and therefore in that case the PV panels will be installed on steel beams spanning over load-bearing walls. Therefore it's very important that the supplier has a look, or you bring him or her photos of the roof and some characteristics of the area around it. And the last thing that you need also to check, besides the price, of course, is what type of after-sales service the supplier has. You can ask your friends, you can check on the internet, on the popularity of the supplier, and so on and so forth.
So if I am understanding correctly, it's not a matter of going into different shops and seeing which shop gives me the cheapest price, because if someone is selling me less peak wattage, did you call it?
Yes.
Then it's probably cheaper. And if they are quoting a smaller inverter, the price will look cheaper, but in actual fact, I'm getting a smaller heart for my solar panel system. So it's important, I'm understanding that we need to compare like with like. And I can't just go into a shop and ask them, I want to cram as many solar panels on my roof as possible, because I didn't know there was this legal in a way, maximum amount that I can have as a household of 3.6 kilowatts, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I didn't know about that maximum limit. set for households, and that maybe it also depends on the size of the roof that I have and on the type of roof that I have.
Yes, that is a good question as well. So how can you decide how many PV panels you can put on the roof? Roughly, every 1,000 watt peak occupies 5 square meters. So if your roof is 10 square meters, probably you can put 2 kilowatt peak. Be careful also that because the PV panels are not all placed in the same frame and the same inclination, if you put some PV panels in the front, then you need to leave space and then put the next PV panels behind it in order to avoid cross shading. So in general, if you look at the roof space of your roof, the whole total roof, if you want to fill it up completely, you need to work with a ratio of 0.5. So if the roof is 100 square meters, you can only install a system that occupies 50 square meters because you will need to leave space in between the panels to avoid cross shading, and also you need to leave space around the perimeter to avoid the turbulence of the wind blowing away your panels in cases of hurricane force winds. So roughly we use the ratio of 50% of your roof area or of the area where you want to put the PV systems to determine how many kilowatt peaks you can have. So I give an example. If you have 100 square meters, only 50 of them can be used for PV panels. And because each kilowatt peak occupies 5 square meters, then that 50 square meter will be enough for 10 kilowatt peak. But in single phase households, you can only install 3.6 kilowatt peak. So you need to take that into consideration. The second point you mentioned about the inverter, yes, be careful when you get the quotation that the size of the inverter is plus or minus 10% or 15% at maximum from the size of the PV system. So if the supplier gives you a 3.6 kilowatt peak PV panel, so that he gives you 10 panels, each 360 watts, the inverter must be very close to 3.6 kilowatt peak. Because if he gives you a 2 kilowatt peak to make the system look cheaper, then it means that when the PV panels are generating a lot of energy, the inverter will simply shave them off, will cut off, and will only produce 2 kilowatt peak. That is good marketing, but very bad design. So
Okay.
be careful from that.
So we need to specifically ask, is the inverter you're quoting me able to cope with the energy that the PVs I would buy will be generating? So it's not, so it's solar panels in relation to my roof or my space and its safety, avoiding shading, and ensuring that the inverter can handle all the electricity the panels I buy will generate, because otherwise it'll just be wasted because the inverter will not take the excess. That is very helpful because, as you know, we don't often buy solar panels, and many of us consumers feel somewhat overwhelmed and a bit at a loss when we start shopping around. I hope these tips that you've given us are of help to the consumers watching this feature. I thank you and look forward to another feature in the future, giving further information maybe about what to look for in the guarantee, so that the consumers will feel they've got the right information to make a decision about buying solar panels. Thank you, and on behalf of the Association for Consumer Rights, I thank once again Prof. Yousif for this information.